I am recording. This is the first time I've recorded a FaceTime conversation. I have a software call recorder that I
Hmm.
found out through Tim Ferriss. So
Okay.
it hasn't failed me on the audio side. Hoping it doesn't fail me on the video side. But
Yeah,
Mayon,
good,
welcome back to the podcast. Always love having a conversation with you.
dude. It's always great to be on. Like I said, having a conversation with you is always a pleasure.
So you are the third guest that I've had during the global pandemic uh, from COVID-19. And the theme that I have across all the guests that I've had on thus far are all of them are artists.
Ha,
The first one was a musician. The second one was a musician who uh, uh, daylights as an engineer, and then
ha.
now we have you, an engineer who is I hate to put a box around you, but you're a content creator, you're a graphic designer, you're a writer, and you probably do a bunch of other things that I don't know of that I don't want to shortchange you on. But I was I was thinking about it, and it comes down to I'm really interested at this time in particular to talk to smart people who are able to create and able to build. And you check all of those boxes and then some when it comes to that. So just love to kind of hear how you're looking at problem solving during this time of great challenges.
Well, I know it's funny how you said that the whole the artistry side, and then actually kind of even coming up to this conversation we've been having, I've been kind of thinking about it. But I think I even kind of coined like a loose term for it, but the creativity, and I said, and I called it the quarantivity, of it
Uh-huh.
all. It's just the fact that this right now is kind of a fork in the road where there is. I mean, this is a life altering change. I know. I'm going to say specifically, there's life altering things going on around the coronavirus,
Hmm.
but it being a global pandemic, I'm noticing, I'm seeing just the changes in business, in artistry, in access to a multitude of things have
Hmm.
literally been turned on his ear since we've started this. I mean, the movie industry. I know a lot of the movie theaters are kind of upset, but the film companies have kind of like created a whole new form now, where now you can access a blockbuster movie, through the luxury of sitting at home. And then
Hmm.
the other side of it too, there's a lot of artists that are out there creating. I'm going to even say like weekly, nightly forums where they're sharing their content. Probably one of the ones that always sticks out to me, and one of the ones I know I've enjoyed has been Questlove of the Roots. For those
Oh,
that don't know,
really?
he's the band leader for the Roots on Jimmy Fallon now. But he's been DJing pretty much, I know, on a weekly basis and then multiple times a week, and he's been raising funds to. I think he's actually, it's a food bank that I think he's doing related to kids being out of school, if I remember correctly. That'd be have to something I have
Mm.
to, but he's been doing that. There's been artists, just the nightly uh, interview session, the late night shows. Bill Maher, I mean John Oliver, he's probably been the funniest one about it. But it's just they're adapting to the situation and they're making it work and communicating. And then from the engineering side, I mentioned before the company that I work for, they've helped in just innovating, turning industries that make face masks and the ventilators. As I was saying before, typically it's something that takes a period that one person works on, and it takes the ventilator at least a day plus to make. Where we're turning around and making them in less than an hour. And in the same vein, the surgical mask that we have. So just we're relying on our infrastructure, mass production.
Hmm.
The industry's kind of been hit as a whole as far as people being at home not buying, but these are some of those essential products that we need at some point. People need cars, so it gets
Hmm.
to that time of day where, hey, there's so long you can go without even in the pandemic, if your car goes out, you got to get another car. Shopping experience may be different, but
Hmm.
you got to do that. But I'll just say that I know that there's been periods of uh, throughout time that have been, unfortunately, I don't want to say it's similar to this, but this is obviously something we're going to be reading about in history books, our kids and our grandkids.
Hmm.
But at the same time, too, I do know that there's living in I guess it, I guess to separate it from a period of time and the global pandemic, but then there's the coronavirus side of it too. There's a lot of emotion behind it. There's multiple groups of people that have different varying opinions, and then there's the facts that are out there too. But I think that part of it and the here and now, that's probably the most sensitive side of it, But and the part that you want to tread lightly around,
Hmm.
whereas the innovation, that's the part that you're like, yeah, okay, I'm glad to see that this came out of it.
There's so many different things there that were great points that I want to touch on, but I think will be helpful in a linear way. Kind of start from what we do know, and then work towards what we know now, and then potentially what we're looking forward to come. And you, as a person, you're one of the most well-read person when it comes to history that I know of, that has an understanding of not only kind of the history of what we're told in school, but what goes outside of that as
Yeah.
well, and to give additional context from different cultures and different ways of viewing the world, and how people that have come before us have dealt with certain things. So when you're looking at COVID-19, I guess there's a couple ways that we can look at it. We can look at it from the epidemiology perspective on how it's impacting the biology end of things, or we can also look at the economic impact too. So it's kind of a bifurcated type situation where we're getting hit on different angles. But when you think about the situation that we're in now, is there anything that comes to your mind when your knowledge of history, when you look at this situation and you say, here's another one of this, and what would this be? What would another one of that be?
Well, I know the one that has been brought up multiple times in media, multiple across multiple platforms, is the Spanish flu.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, you mentioned in the historical context of it, it's funny that you kind of say that. There's a lot of similar veins as far as the reaction to it. So the talking in the historical context and I'm going to say the reaction and the government's involvement of that there's a lot of, I'm going to say, similarities, but the interesting one, it kind of gets wrapped up in the name of the Spanish flu. So
Mm.
a lot of people, the first, even back then and from the 1910s till now, have thought that the Spanish flu started in Spain and it spread across the entire world. But the unfortunate part was that I don't know off the top of my head where the origins were, or even if they were able to try to track them down. But the difference was it kind of unfolded in a similar fashion as the coronavirus did, in how folks were trying to mask how big of a threat it was back then. So the Spanish flu was an epidemic that raced across the world, killing millions and millions of people across the entire world. As well, killing millions of people across the world back then. But the only people, and this was happening around World War I, if I remember correctly. And I know the Spanish were the only ones that were reporting it and reporting their numbers and, hey, the fallout from the Spanish flu. So when it came to the media, that's why it gained the name and notoriety behind the Spanish flu, because they were the first ones to acknowledge and to report that this epidemic was coming through and ravaging through their country. Where literally at the exact same time, it was doing the same thing across the entire globe. So obviously, you've been watching the media. I know there's been a lot of question even now as far as timing and how long have people known about it and different things like that. But I say that's what I'm going to say. That's probably historically that's probably one of the more central.
Mhm. What
I know. Sorry, go ahead.
one of the things that you had talked about was this idea of masking the implications of the virus in 1918, kind of trying to downplay things, business as usual. Um, are we do you how do you feel about I don't want to talk about, January or February, was it here, did we know that it was here, because that's done and over with, but now we're in a place where we're starting to resurface this idea of calling the COVID virus just another flu, and it's kind of floating up to the surface of this idea of we went too far. It's not as serious. Let's open up this our states and our cities, regardless if we're not hitting benchmarks when it comes to new cases. Um, it, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that is? It seems, as I had mentioned before, a big part of this is the economic piece of it, and economically, I think that personally, we're not going to see the ramifications of the shelter in place until the end of Q2. We're going to see it through Q3. And then, Q4, who knows where we're going to be at. But, obviously that had an impact. But do you think that we kind of went for the short term gratification of these people, they don't want to stay in their houses anymore? We can't figure out how to stabilize the economy the right way. Do you think that we're returning to trying to get back to BAU right now is too premature?
So I'll start off by saying, I'm not a medical professional by any stretch of the imagination, but it all goes. I do read a lot. I do a lot of research, and I'm one for. I always like to. I'm not one that holds, an article that I read on the internet at face value. I like to dig a little deeper, peel back, and take some input. But I always kind of approach it, looking at multiple resources, and like our last conversation, I told you, like, as far as dietary uh, needs or whatever like that, all the information's out there, but it's not all collected in the same place.
Mm.
It's kind of like the phenomenon of a black hole, whereas the black holes are only theorized, and they're they're one of those things that they're proven, or their theory is based on the absence of something being in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it all goes back to, if somebody's trying to hide data, or hide the story, there's obviously something going on. So I'll
Mm.
kind of move on to the fact that there's historically known about different things. I'll bring up you're talking about the flu. Is the coronavirus similar to the flu? Is it worse? Is it not as bad? The flu, it kills people every year. I'm not to soften it or anything like that, but it's the fact that we don't know. They're still doing research as every day goes on. So for you to say that, for me to say, or for anybody to say that it's worse or not, they're basing it on information that they had at the time. So if things change, and I'll kind of separate the I'm going to say the medical opinion and the medical fact from the economical fact. I'll take the coronavirus out of it, and especially given the fact that there hasn't been solidified, information on, the ins and outs of it. They said they're still learning things as the days go on, that in relation to them having a vaccine and how it's caught. There's been conversations about that recently, as far as how long it stays on surfaces and all that. But that information's out there. You gotta peel it back and digest it your own way. But I guess the way I look at it, for me, if it's a coronavirus, the Ebola virus, or whatever it is, if you're if you're saying, and this goes back to how contagious it is, and that's the part that I don't know. But if you're saying we need to weigh people's lives over over what the economic value of our economy is, that for me, that's one of those empathetic things. I mean, Ford got in trouble with that back in the '70s, I believe it was, with the Pinto, where
Mm,
they did that same kind of math. We're like, well, okay, how much do we value a person's life at? You know,
mm,
we got this car out on the road. The value of one person's life is this. If we leave that car out there, and this is the Pinto is the car that blew up when they got rear-ended. They
mm,
had a weird design where if it got rear-ended at under 30 miles an hour, it caught fire and it blew up. So they were talking about, and they knew about it literally. I think they found out about it after they launched it, or right at the tail end of the release phase. But they released it. They did the math, and then they calculated that it would be cheaper for them to pay somebody that would sue them than it would be to recall and discontinue that car. And it was a small compact car, one of the first ones. Uh, so they continued down the road and they put the car out there. And from what I understand, somebody did die. They ended up suing, and I believe somebody released that paperwork. There was actually a memo that had gone through that had those numbers breaking down. So when the government got involved and when they sued them for it, I think they had estimated $1 million or like $250,000 for the value of a human life. When the judge saw that they awarded the family suing like $500 million or something like that.
mm,
But they did it to kind of set an example. It's like, hey, you can't be going out here, but valuing, setting the value of a person's life, and
mm,
that's where I guess my head is and all this. How do we set the value of human life, and what's right, what's wrong? I mean, this is not the first time we've had a virus like this, and this is not going to be the last time. So I
mm.
mean, we got to work around. But I think as we transition and a lot of the states are opening up, I think the checks and balances that we are putting in place are helping. As we still peel back and try to figure out what's going on. You know, uh, cleaning surfaces, sanitizing, and then people being around. I mean, if they think that that's going to help and that makes people feel better, But there's a lot of emotion behind it. The whole stay at
Mhm,
home orders and having to wear a mask all the time, and I mean, there's a
mhm.
lot of people that are on the flip side of that are like, I'm not wearing a freaking mask, and then there's people that literally won't come out of their house right now because they think So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of emotion out there.
And that emotion is, I feel like, coming up against, for lack of a better term, evidence, because we're still learning so much about the disease. But when it comes to information and misinformation, me coming from a background of communication and media, specifically digital media, it makes me think of an author who I follow, Yuval Noah Harari, who was on a podcast, a Sam Harris podcast, where he talked about how this is the first time in history, in recorded history, where the way that to manipulate large groups of people is not through as historically governments and institutions have done by not allowing information, but allowing so much information that it becomes disinformation. So kind of like a
Mm-hmm.
overflow, a water hose of information. So someone like you who has a more evidence-based approach to things as an engineer, as a scientist, you seem like someone who refers to data and looks at how things play out and kind of build from there. How do you sift through the landscape of information when it comes to this situation?
Well, like I guess the best way to say it, I mean, I have opinions about a lot of things too, but depending on the situation, I like to keep certain things opinions to myself, and I like to, if I'm sharing information, I kind of like to rely on fact. I could share my opinion. It's like certain things, like this whole
Mhm.
situation. Stay. I like it. But this is the life we're living right now. There's, like I said, our lives are different, but there's, I don't know. It's just there's a lot to it. I mean, I guess I'm not sure the right way to kind of approach it, but well, I'll use news as an example, and I know this right here, and actually, I'll say news. The whole Fox News, MSNBC, all these news outlets that they call themselves, which actually there's a big difference between news and opinion. And MSNBC, Fox News, but there's periods of time, there's periods throughout the day that they do report news, but for the most part, it's an entertainment program where they talk about a situation. The first time that you actually, if somebody is reporting on a situation that's going on, and the first time that they say, "I think," or "we assume," or "it looks like," it goes from news to entertainment. And Fox News, MSNBC. I mean, you go down all even CNN, all those guys. I mean, this. Uh, I don't. I'm going to say I'm not. I don't agree or don't disagree, but I know our president kind of touts the fake news narrative all the time. But the difference between those media outlets, that's probably even the better way to say that, and what I grew up on. I mean, for me, if I remember right, there were three news outlets, and they came on at 6 o'clock at night. That was it. It was ABC, NBC, and CBS, the nightly news. It was Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, and Dan Rather. And that at 6 o'clock, those guys got on and they read from a teleprompter, and they said, "This is the news," and that was it. They didn't say I feel as though or I think, and like Lebanon when the bomb blew up over there in Lebanon. It's like, oh well, I think so and so did it. No, they were like, hey, this happened, and that's what you guys need to know.
Yeah.
Now it's like, hey, we got a picture of a guy running around. We think he's brown, so we think he no. So that being the big part of that for me, I think that plays a big part, and even on it's even more prevalent now on with the internet being out there. It's like anybody can get out there and say whatever the heck they feel. So,
Mhm.
and that's for me. That's kind of where I differ. I mean, at times I'll kind of I'll peek my head around the corner to kind of see what's being said, but until there's some hard fact about it, because I mean most of the stuff out there from every I mean the government, from different people talking about different things, it's varied, and it's been contradicted. The best way to say that, because you got to remember too. I mean, there's been a lot of different things said over the course of this stuff kind of rolling out. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the best way for me to summarize my thoughts. That's the best way for me to kind of
Yeah.
capture it. Media outlets, news media outlets versus Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings, and Dan Rather.
And for us, I mean, being on the front line, we're not on the front lines as a healthcare worker or a first responder, but like having a chat before we got on and started recording, talking about our respective companies and what they're doing, kind of seeing firsthand the at least the companies that we have a direct relationship with and that we're contributing to. We're seeing them step up to the plate and do things that before were not thought to be possible. So it seems like this great challenge has called forth within our industry to push past what we thought was capable. And it just makes me think of this idea of like my cousin who had on the podcast numerous times. His thought was most inventions are the result of war. And I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know because I've met some resistance of that quote, but it's this idea of to me when the stakes at hand are at the highest, you're forced to bring out within you the most that you possibly can muster up, and usually that's much more than you thought was possible. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I would say, like, I would say that quote is a little. I'm a little like, eh. But what I'll say is, there's been a lot of inventions that have come out of war. There's been a lot of innovation that's come out of war. There's a lot of evil that's come out of war. But kind of what it's saying for me, it's invention. Most inventions come out of inconvenience. It's
Mm.
one of the situations where I like the I kind of give you a good kind of laugh kind of thing. But like YouTube is one invention that came out of one of those inconvenience. YouTube started over basically the water cooler. The guy that invented YouTube or started YouTube gets to work Monday morning. Everybody's around the water cooler talking about Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson at the Super Bowl, and he didn't see it. He missed the whole big reveal. I'm not sure if you remember that situation, but that was the whole
Yeah.
they call it the nipple gate. So he was, but like he was really bothered by that. It's like everybody's talking about it. He didn't get to see it, and you got to remember before YouTube, and I think TiVo might have been out, but that was the only semblance of unless you videotape the football game. And like I said, there's a couple people. I mean, I think it was more prevalent back in the day, but nobody videotaped the football game, unless you were out working or something like that. But that kind of led to that. He didn't see what everybody was talking about. It might have been like a person that caught it on the camera or something like that. They might have that wasn't going to be on the front page of the paper. They talked about it, but the picture wasn't going to be there. He was like, "Man, I wanted to see that." So out of kind of necessity, he created
Uh-huh.
YouTube. It obviously changed the whole entire world. But there's a lot of things that happen out of that. But
Uh-huh.
we're talking about how we're helping make ventilators and we're helping make masks. The same thing. 70 years ago, back during World War II, same thing happened. We were making cars and well, basically cars. I mean, in some form, trucks at the time.
Uh-huh.
But we switched our entire infrastructure over, and we helped the war effort with building bombers and tanks and trucks and bullets and all that kind of stuff. We helped with that, and it was them pumping them out at a rate that was unprecedented at that time.
Yeah. So it makes me think of a conversation that I had with Steve and Daniel. They're the owner of the Silk Gallery in
Oh,
downtown Youngstown.
yep.
And I had them on the podcast, and Steve was telling me that usually you see a lot of creativity come from uh, impoverished communities.
Hmm?
And he was saying that the reason why he felt that you see a lot of creative people come from humble beginnings or humble environments is because they have to be. They have to be resourceful. And I feel like in this time of just this ramp up period of a lot of uncertainty and this lack of ability to kind of be wasteful, we've kind of had to trim the fat and really prioritize efficiently and effectively to execute appropriately. Um, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on resourcefulness? Have you felt that in your own life over the course of the past 8 to 10 weeks, where you yourself, with your projects that you're working on, both at work and outside of work, your own pursuits, where you had to be resourceful?
As an artist, I mean, that's kind of like one of those, like you always hear the statement "starving artists," and but to be honest with you, art is an expensive profession. So you either got to be really good for people to help you get your supplies, and I mean, just framing in itself is like a an expense that is unreal if you see how much it costs. But I think there is innovation and a lot of creativity that comes out of the having to work around that. But I'm going to say maybe it's been more of a, I mean, not resourcefulness, but it's kind of like more time to center myself and refocus has probably been the bigger thing. Because I have been, it was right before all this started. I kind of launched my website, and then from there, I've kind of been just pouring things on and making logos and working on my comic book and just doing a multitude of things around that. So it's been like the creativity, the juices have been flowing, but it's just kind of like more of the refocus because it's like I know I had that same kind of issue when I was working in Ohio. It's just kind of like it's when you have, I think artists, or even I'm not sure if it's the artist side of my brain or the engineering side of my brain, but it's like things for me are always just going a mile a minute. So back when I first got down there, it's just kind of like the focus was there weren't a lot of distractions when I first got down there. The best way to say it. So it was like, what can I do? And I'm like, well, I mean, drawing is something that I love and I love doing. So it was kind of like there was nothing that was taking me away from it. Whereas you start doing more things, you're going out to eat, meeting up with friends. You got a concert, you got the auto show, you got the car, got all these
Mm-hmm.
different things going on. It's kind of that what takes away from your time. But now, I mean, that's pretty much everybody across the board. All that stuff, those other things are gone. So that's where again, that's where that I'm going to say that focus or that me being centered has come, where I have the time to solely work on all this stuff. And I mean, I'm doing different projects around the house and all that, but just is between projects around the house and working on art. That's been I've been having fun with it, and I've been putting together a lot of stuff. So a lot of stuff been able to share, and a lot of stuff I'm still working on getting together so I can share in the near future. So
So it sounds like you have a lot of creative momentum on your side right now.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I like it. And I had a little. I was kind of like maybe chugging along before, but now it kind of the steam just kind of kicked in, So I'm cranking, man. I'm cranking. So
Do you feel like during this time in your creative process, has there anything that stood out to you that before you didn't realize? Like, is there something that you're working on that you didn't realize how much you cared about it, or how meaningful it was for you? Or was there something that you tackled that you kind of been putting off for a while, but once you started to tackle it, it wasn't as bad as you thought?
well, I guess coincidentally, some things kind of fell in place right before everything happened. I know my website. There was I'm trying to think. There was a graphic that I had like a big hurdle with that I needed to get, and then I ended up buying a program that kind of ended up getting Adobe Illustrator that kind of helped with just one of my logos that I was having some issues with. So that kind of opened up the door, as far as my apparel and my, different things like that, t-shirts and working on getting other things done. And I was able to get my website finally going. And then to answer your question directly, I know I've been struggling with my second comic book, because I've done one, and I mean it's been over 5 years now, but it's like that whole sophomore blitz or sophomore they saw curse, you got 30 years to put together your freshman debut, like what they say artists, musicians when they release their album, you got your freshman, your initial debut, you got your whole life that you've been working on that, and then you got to turn around and you got to put out another one, and guess what? You don't got the same amount of time that you have,
Mm.
and it's supposed to be better than what your debut was. So you
Mm-hmm.
kind of second guess yourself a lot. And I know actually it's not that I haven't been working on my comic book since I put my first one out. It's been, I want to make it better, and so it's
Mm.
been a lot of restarts and misstarts, and then a couple life changing events that happen in there too. But the whole just starting over. And I mean, I got pages around here, me starting and stopping and different little books where I started. But I kind of settled on one that I know that I had been working up to. That I said, hey, I need to have all these pieces in place. But the funny thing is, I kind of was able to reflect and see that all these pieces are in place already. I was thinking that they had to be set up a certain way, so I'm just going to with my ultimate comic and I've been putting that together. So I've been I reset that and I've been slowly getting that in line so I can actually have release another comic book. So
That's interesting. I feel like the same way has been for my writing. I had the chance to take a step back and say, look at all this stuff that I've written. Most of it's not good. I would say 98% of it's not good. But at least it's there, and there's something. There's this rock now that exists that I
mm,
can go back in and chisel away at and try to make it as clean as possible. And if there's anything left over, maybe I can piece that together with other pieces that I chiseled down to
yep.
make it something coherent, to make it something that could be helpful to me or to others. So it's really giving me the space to kind of take a step back, reevaluate. Okay, what do we have? What's really important, and then how do we plug this in moving forward?
No, I agree because there's been, as I was saying, all the different musicians out there. There's a lot of artists. They've been putting out a lot of content. So it's even cool. Like one of my buddies I made putting out comics. He's a fellow creator. He's been kind of he just turned it on, man. It's like he's got the juices flowing. So been working on craft beer labels. He's putting together the origin of his one of his main characters. He's getting it done. So when you got that time and you get that focus, and that's part of it too. It's just kind of maybe even prioritizing. What is important. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, this is something that holds a lot of importance in my life. So just kind of wanting to do that. But it's I got other things too that are important. There's just even job stuff.
Yeah.
I love the work that I do and the company I work for. But
Mm-hmm.
being able to kind of offset that as far as just my creative muses, and that's always important too to have that what they call it, that work life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Something that hey, when you go home, still puts a smile on your face, and then they'll turn around the next day, go back to work. That
Mm-hmm.
want to be. It's always nice to have a profession that puts a smile on your face too. It's not always going to do that, but I think that plays a big part to keeping you sane.
Mm-hmm.
Having like this. So
Yeah, that's been super helpful for me to watch how the company that I work for has navigated this, and seeing what they have prioritized during the situation has made me so thankful to be a part of the organization. And it's really brought a lot of meaning towards the work that I do. And I feel like once we get on the other side of this, I'm gonna look at the company and say, I owe you guys one. I really owe you one of the work that you did for other people, to help other people, and to prioritize our communities. It's really ignited the work that I do on the day-to-day basis to contribute. So I just feel like it's kind of like seamless now of the things that I was doing between 5 and 9 o'clock, 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. The things that I were doing were obviously important because that was the time that I had them. But now I have so much more meaning between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., kind of seeing the true character of the people that I work with and alongside of. So it's just been really helpful to kind of reorient my focus and how I'm contributing and what we can do as a collective. And I'm very excited.
oh, yeah, dude, I understand exactly what you mean. Same with my company. Just the things we've been able to do despite all of this craziness out there, and all the lives that we've impacted too. It's just it's unreal, and it kind of makes you even more excited for a company. You already knew what you're working with was awesome, and then this happens, and it's like, whoa, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been also been life altering for everybody. So
Mm-hmm.
this is like uncharted territory, and I know I'm just curious to see kind of, and I'm talking like the 1 to 2 year things out. I know like however this goes, the next. I'm hoping I'm only saying like month to 3 months, but the next 3 to 6 months, I know there's going to be that immediate life changing thing, but just
Mm-hmm.
seeing how different companies operate,
Mm-hmm.
and and different creators and different manufacturers and innovators.
Mm-hmm.
Just and then too, I mean, I know people been teasing, but all the little ones that are going to come out of this,
Yeah.
the quarantine babies,
Ah.
the quarantines. But there, there's a kind of, this is a big fork in the road for a lot of people, and
Yeah.
I'm anxious and excited to see how we come out of on the other side. So
Yeah, I mean, the silver lining to me is hopefully I'll have the blessing to sit on a rocking chair in front of my grandchildren and talk to them about the 20s and
yeah,
about the triumphs that we had to overcome and how they don't know anything about it. That's the goal. The goal is really to say you guys don't know, and there's going to be a lot of stretching in between. There's going to be
yep.
a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, unfortunately, a lot of loss, financially. And I mean, unfortunately, we've already lost people because of this. But I feel like you said that this is unprecedented times. We haven't dealt with this. You're right. I mean, we haven't dealt with this in our time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And it kind of seems like the phrase that really stuck out to me by Eric Weinstein, who he heads the venture capital fund for Peter Thiel, and the way he explains it is that uh, our generation, the past 75 years, he calls it the great nap. We've had a great nap. And I've been looking at history, and I look at 1945 when we came out of World War II. I mean, that was an unprecedented time where the United States had 80% of the world's gold reserves,
Mm-hmm.
and attributed to, like, I think it was like 75% of the world's GDP, because Europe was rebuilding. They were completely uh, destroyed.
Dude, the
So
entire world, Europe,
yeah,
Southeast Asia, Japan, everybody have been,
yeah.
yeah, everybody was starting from scratch.
So we were relatively, at least domestically, we were insulated from that. We had intrinsic value in our gold supply, and that led to us becoming the world's currency, and ultimately the world's superpower. We had the strongest
Oh yeah,
military.
oh yeah.
So that was 1945. Fast forward to 1971, we jump off the gold standard, and that changed things. That ushered in fiat currency, where it's the currency that you have is worth as what the government tells you it is. So fast forward to from then to now, there's been kind of a stagnation in innovation that is tied to household income growth. So when you see innovation has kind of skyrocketed where income growth has stagnated,
Oh yeah.
and a lot of people point to automation as the reason is that being the case, right? And this might hit home for you, right? Because I come from Youngstown, Ohio, where our golden days were in the 1950s or whatever, and when steel was booming. And then you come from Michigan, right? And an area where at one point in Detroit, Michigan, the middle income for a blue collar worker with a high school diploma was unrivaled of any
Mm-hmm.
time in history. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see that again. That the industrialness the middle class American in Detroit, Michigan, in the 1950s and 60s. I don't think we'll ever see that type of wealth generated in such a short amount of time without having a doctorate degree or having starting a company or whatever. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I know it's like I would say, um, politics. I mean, I call myself a staunch independent, and I'm at the same token, I'm very empathetic. So that can say you can call me some other, you can put me in a category, but I'm going to say independent. So I look at each individual on a case by case basis, and I'm going to say too, all the politicians that we've had. I mean, there's good and there's bad, and all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Obama, there was good and bad, and then I'll even say Donald Trump. Well, I'm going to say, and for sure, Donald Trump, there's good and bad. And a lot of people would probably question me by saying that, but no, there's some good in him, and then there's bad. I mean, there's some things that he goes through and he does that's very questionable. Then again, too, building off the point that you just said, there's good, and I personally think, and I know, just overall, we've gotten into we've become a more of a service industry. And we do have some manufacturing that is done in the U.S., and that was one of Donald Trump's biggest. I'm gonna say things that got one of his biggest talking points. Bringing
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing, basically bringing money back to the United States, because we buy a lot of our raw materials. There's a lot of our low end stuff. I mean, the shirts, the clothing that we wear, and a lot of those things we wear, those come from countries that across the world. But it all goes back to, for me, and I always tell people, it's like we're kind of our worst enemy. If you're one that argue, if you don't want to pay more than, I'm trying to what's like a good example. Like, basically, if you go shop at Walmart and you're like, you balk at paying more than, $2 for a loaf of bread, but I know bread's made in the United States. But if you get upset that you got to spend more than $20 on a T-shirt, that right there,
Mm-hmm.
there there's infrastructure and there's stuff that's required. I'm pretty sure we can find places in the United States where we can make T-shirts and little intricate things, but
Mm-hmm.
we'd be the first ones. All that stuff that Walmart, we're the ones that kind of create the monster. We're going around looking for the lowest
Mm-hmm.
price. But I'm one to say that, hey, I don't see why we can't manufacture things. And then there's companies that have been manufacturing things in here. I think one of the biggest industries that have kind of taken place and have kind of that has swept across the United States is the microbreweries. That right there in itself, well, for a long period of time, that was a macro business. One of those big, and Anheuser-Busch and all that, and those are owned by global companies now. But these microbreweries, just the innovation and the business fortitude that they're doing, and even some of the stuff that a lot of the big manufacturers, automotive industry that's doing. There's stuff that is built in the States. But what Donald Trump said, and the trade window between Mexico and Canada and China and all these different places across the world, that's what I'll kind of say. And to your point, wages have stagnated, but the difference in that period of time that you mentioned, the 50s and the 60s were a very unique time. And if you add all the math up together, and there's people that get all of their panties in a bunch about it, but yes, the 50s and the 60s were the most economically successful, flourishing times in our country's history. But the difference is we were the sole manufacturer for the entire world. That 70% number that you said, Europe, Asia, all those countries have been basically bombed and taken back to the Stone Ages, and they had to
Yeah.
start. And then in Germany, I mean, you go down the whole list. Germany, even England to a point, uh, uh, almost all of Eastern Europe,
Mm-hmm.
Japan. I mean, you go down every single one of those. It basically took them 20 to 30 years for them to kind of get their stuff back together. And guess what? That ended up being the 70s. And that's when we started getting competition. And then that's when I'm going to say manufacturers' heads started getting really big because they've been dominant for like 30, 40 years. And we're like, hey, we can sell anything we want and people will buy it. Well, that's the same period that the Japanese and the Germans and then eventually the Koreans started rolling up on our doors, and selling different things. And like Bangladesh and Vietnam, all the little places that make all these little trinkets across the world, this is like the time. But it all goes back to, and I always use the iPhone, and that's one I would say bad example. They can make iPhones here too, but that's a whole story in itself. But I always use the iPhone as an example of something that people it's if you build it, they will come type of scenario. Uh, there's products out there that people covet, and they'll line up around the block to come get, and but people like pretty things. I mean, that's how it boils around, because there's a story out there. There actually is a couple stories. I know there's one called the Magic. Actually, let me look that up. It was actually it was basically a smartphone that this company invented during like the early '90s, and it fell flat. But then there was Zoom that came out too. There's timing actually plays luck, timing, innovation, and something that looks good all play a part because there's always, I mean, you remember too, like there's always every year there was always two movies that are always the same.
Yeah.
One knocks it out of the park, the other one like Armageddon and Deep Impact. So
yeah, that's a good point.
General Magic, I think is what it's called. And it was a documentary about the development of a smartphone back in it was like this perfect thing, and then it got shelved, and then Apple comes along, 10 years later and changes the entire world.
Right time, right place, context is everything. Yeah.
General Magic, yeah. So
and it's just, we were talking about making things here in the U.S. I was listening to a podcast. The owner of the Golden State Warriors, who is a venture capitalist, he was saying that he believes that when you trace route the economic impacts of this shutdown and of the virus. For instance, they looked at the data for the U.S. Box office in the month of April. So in April 2019, the box office pulled in, I think they said $200 million in revenue. The box office in April of 2020 pulled in $5,000.
Yeah.
So I mean that's just one industry.
But where did they get this information? Because I did read that I think Trolls came out in April because there's this whole so AMC is like pissed at DreamWorks. I think they booted DreamWorks because the Trolls was the first major release that came out straight to digital. And AMC got upset that they took Trolls away. But they said that it was like the biggest digital success of all time. So I'm assuming probably that number didn't include the digital release. They're just like movies by itself.
Yes, it was just movie theaters. Yeah, it was just movie
that
theaters. And
they said this Trolls thing was like it made $100 million. It made some ridiculous number.
Yeah, but when you look at the restaurant industry, I'm trying to think what the revenue drop was. I mean, even if it was 20%, that's fatal, right? And it's not even, you're not even in a position where you have bad business or bad pieces within a business that you can move around. You have the federal government saying you cannot do business, right? And so we're in this situation where the owner of the Warriors, he believes the only way that we can climb out of this, it's going to be at least 10 years to climb out of, after everything is said and done, the economic implications. And his theory was that through our addiction to efficiency of leveraging manufacturing overseas and in our supply chains, and driving down costs here. It's revealed a lot of vulnerabilities in our businesses and in our infrastructure. So his thought was that in order to climb out of this hole in the next, decade or so, that we're going to have to do it through inefficiency of bringing manufacturing, bringing jobs in infrastructure here domestically. It's going to cost more. It's going to require people to do things that they don't want to do. It's going to cost education. It's going to cost training. But he
Well,
believes
then,
that's the
too,
way out of it.
we gotta take that on the chin too, because it goes back to there's the best way to say it, and to try and be as fair as possible. There's a reason. I mean, like the people that make the shoes, and basically it's on us to, but everybody has to buy in. But I would say it's on us because it's the cost of making stuff, or I'm going to say it's been made that the cost to do business safely and
Mm-hmm.
humanely and all that
Mm-hmm.
gets cost a certain amount of money, because
Mm-hmm.
all the things that we talk about and we badmouth a lot of these countries that, I mean, you go to what they call them, third world nations, or a lot of these places that, that we buy things from. We were once in that situation, child labor,
Mm-hmm.
sewage in the streets, and all these things that we take for granted now,
Mm-hmm.
because we were there. We didn't have checks and balances and regulations. There's a
Mm-hmm.
reason that there. When you go to the mall or like a public place, those little crash bars
Mm-hmm.
when you exit for emergency exits, so doors that have the crash bars.
Mm-hmm.
It's locked from the outside, but you're able to get out.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that exists is because of what we did here in the United States. That was in New York. I think it was. I don't want to speak wrong. I'm not going to say the wrong company. There was a garment company that there was women and children that worked in this garment. They made some type of clothing, and they worked like 10+ hours, 12 hours a day, and they couldn't take bathroom breaks, and they didn't want to do that, and so they locked them in this manufacturing site where they sold stuff, and it caught fire. The door was locked. Oh yeah, and the freaking thing burnt down, and it killed like an ungodly amount of all the people inside, burn them alive. But now, like I said, for coming out of that, we have this crash bar. So every building that you go into that's publicly used has to have an egress where you can get out of it free flowing, and that is
Wow.
because of that. I mean, you go
Yeah.
down the whole list. There's like anytime you wonder why something is a certain way, there is a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the place across the world. That's not a global requirement though.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a cost, and there's regulation. I mean, there's wheelchair ramps, and when you
Mm-hmm.
go down to all those things, there's a reason that you can't dump you can't dump sewage into the
Mm-hmm.
Cuyahoga River, because guess what? They used to dump sewage, and
It caught on fire.
yeah, I mean, like there's a reason for it. It's but at the same time, right now we're having places that don't have those rules in place make some of our stuff.
Wow.
You know, but and that is because we say we're only going to pay this dollar for that. But then, too, I mean, it is tenfold though. But we only make this amount of money. It's
Mhm.
just like a big kind of circle jerk,
Yeah.
Uh, so it's like, yeah, I don't have $20 to spend on I don't have 20 something that cost me $5 right now. I don't
Mhm.
have $70 to buy a T-shirt,
Mhm.
but because I'm not, I'm paid XYZ because I work at a place that's this. But the innovation side, and I'm going to say that it is possible and it's feasible because you have companies. And I'm going to use the brewing industry that right there is one that kind of created its own thing. These guys, these people have been out there. I mean, you got Modern Methods, you got
Mm.
um,
Birdfish.
Birdfish. You got all a multitude of guys. The ones downtown and Youngstown, but you got them all over the place. These guys, they're creating a product that people are clamoring for and paying top dollar for. So the thing is, I know it's feasible. I mean, the same too.
Mm.
We're using FaceTime, and there's Facebook, and then there's Airbnb, and
Mm-hmm.
there's the innovation and the creativity is there. It's just we have to push it and we have to demand it, and I think we've gotten to a position where the generational change is happening, and there's possibility to do that. But there's a it has to be a big change for that to happen. But we have to take some ownership for it too. So as soon as you say, hey, that costs $1 too much, then you kind of. So, but I definitely I say I'm going to use the craft beer industry as the model that say
Mm-hmm.
that manufacturing is possible, but it's
Mm-hmm.
something that you got. But it all goes back to you creating a product that people demand. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
So that's what you're looking forward to? Are you looking forward to, as a result of this, people are going to be come out much more creative, much more intentional, in figuring out a way to do more with what we have and make it more valuable?
I think that's going to be a big part of it, and I think it's just us demanding more, and wanting more, because
Mm-hmm.
there's as you said, there's that 10-year cycle. There's going to be a large transition because there's still people that were with this one coming. There's people that were still getting their stuff together from the last one. I
Yeah.
mean, because that did the same thing because there were people that were planning on retiring back during that first recession. That literally their entire retirement was just decimated. They had to start from scratch. And there's people that said that I don't think I'll be able to retire. That was back then, And then hey, it's there's just a lot going on, and then too there's the people that always say, hey, you save it up for a rainy day, don't. I don't think they're expecting this kind of a rainy day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So Mayon, I've already taken up an hour of your time. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, I know you got yard work, but before I let you go, um, in the middle of this storm, what should we look forward to? What should we hang on to? What is something that we should keep in our minds as we keep creating?
no, I think just staying positive. Thanking all the people that, despite wherever your head is and your emotions, that there are people. This is a real disease. How bad? How wherever you feel about it. No, there's people that I know that've gotten sick. It's a virus out there. People are getting
Mm,
sick, but there's people out there fighting it. And then there's people out there innovating for it. But for me, it's like stay positive given the situation. Like
mm-hmm,
there's heartbreak that can and will happen through it.
mm-hmm,
But the best way to do is still celebrate. Still innovate, be creative. And reach out, talk to people that you haven't talked to. I mean, I've heard from people that I never would have expected to hear from. So. But just take this time to recenter and just better yourself. I mean, that's the best way to say it because that's the one thing I've done. Just making things better. And like I said, even me doing the artwork. I'm
yeah.
excited that I am able to do that. But I would say support artists, support the medical workers that are out there,
Mm-hmm.
the people working at the grocery store, and then too, I guess this is my one. I'm going to say political rant that I will put out there. All the people that are always wanting to say that people that work in industries that they think that I guess certain people have a thing in their mind where they think that if somebody works at a grocery store or they work in the service industry, like they could have done better and they were one not to. They didn't want to strive for better in their life.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, this whole pandemic has kind of
Mm,
really kind of put people with that kind of opinion on their ear, because guess what? Guess who's holding up the entire world?
Yeah.
It's the people in the service industry. So when you are saying you're cool with, somebody making minimum wage or getting paid, a minuscule amount of money, just kind of, when people talk about raising the minimum wage to a livable status, because as we've talked about more than once, I'm one of those guys that look at data, and I know, and I think back to what I made when I was in grade school. I still, every time the fact that I still see people making almost as much as I did 25 years ago, that it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Blows my mind. And I saw the minimum wage increase 2 or 3 times when I was in grade school. And the fact that it's still under $10 is just mind blowing to me. But like I said, that's my political rant. It's just think about that. The people that X amount of people would kind of necessarily look down on. Just think about all the things that they're doing. So I'm glad that people are talking about them, but supporting them and putting signs up about them, but freaking raise the minimum wage so they can make some more money. That's the way I look at it.
Put your money where your mouth is, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So as far as the politics are concerned, that's my little political foray. But definitely for me, I've definitely been creative. I can't see my show. I've been doing.
Yeah. Nice.
So anybody that's checking us out, check me out. me-comics.com. I got my Etsy shop. That's ME Comics, one word. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook, as you know, too. So, but yeah, so just stay positive. That's the kind of the best way to say it. Stay positive, man.
Well, there's a lot going on. There is a lot that we can learn from the situation. And there's a lot that we're going to learn from this podcast, Mayon. Thank you so much. I'm excited to see how the video portion came up. I'm going to put it on YouTube, and it's going to go viral, and it's going to offend so many people that they're going to pull it. And then we're going to do another podcast about how we got so influential that Google kicked us off of YouTube. So that's the plan.
That's why I had you got to tread lightly, man. Because you can't. So.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'm dropping this Thursday, but we will talk before then.
Cool, man.